Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nevada Lithium live event hosted by Six. I'm pleased to introduce the speaker for today, Stephen Rentschler, the CEO. Steve will discuss the recent Seismic survey results, and after that, we'll be accepting questions. As a reminder, you can submit your questions in the chat at any point during the presentation. As always, this event is being recorded and will be available to watch shortly afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to hand things over to you, Steve, so that we can get started.
Super. Thanks very much, Max. Happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully everybody got a chance to take a look at our news release from yesterday. This really got some interesting and I think some very exciting, basically things that we can think about that could generate additional shareholder value at Bonnie Claire. And I wanted to take a couple of minutes today to go over them with you because when you have situations like this where there are a lot of moving pieces, I just want to make sure that people understand that we have a primary focus that we're sticking with. However, there are other things that we can do and are doing simultaneously to see if we can unlock this value. And I think everybody's going to agree with us that this is a pretty exciting opportunity and something that we've been working on for a while. So let me take a minute first and set the stage with what we have, and then basically how this all sort of ties together with what I would say is this new opportunity for Brine. So remembering that Bonnie Claire, the existing resource that we have right now, is a huge sedimentary deposit, right? So over millions of years, we had the weathering of rocks, and lithium was deposited in these huge blankets that we've basically been, unveiling over the course of the past couple of years, most recently with one of our very deep drill core holes where we see these increasing grades as you continue to go deeper and deeper. And in fact, the latest drill hole that we did went down another, say, 500 feet or 150 meters below what we've normally done at Bonnie Claire, and we continue to see this mineralization expanding, become even a higher grade. And that's sort of the first part of the recipe that I think we want to talk about with regards to a potential brine opportunity. So all of that, the sedimentary package remains in place. We have the PEA that was done 2 years ago. We're working on the PFS. The metallurgy all of this is continuing to advance towards that huge net present value that was established in the PEA. And to those of you who don't know, again, at very low lithium prices, that was about $1.5 billion US dollars at $13,400 lithium. That would give us a 32,000 ton LCE mine for 40-year mine life, using a very, very small portion of the overall resource. And of course, at anywhere what I think people consider to be normalized higher long-term prices of say $25,000, $30,000 a ton, the NPV raises to $5 billion, $6 billion. I mean, just tremendous amounts of value here. Well, that sedimentary package is also sort of the first, I would say, of the parts of the recipe for if we can unlock an additional brine opportunity here. And I sort of think about it like baking a cake, where you always need certain things, flour, eggs, whatever. And then some things start to change if you want to make a vanilla cake versus a chocolate cake. Well, the sedimentary deposit that we have will basically be the source of the lithium if we were to find it in brine. So we know we have all of that already in place. The second piece, or the second component of the recipe that we were hoping to find, was basically a way for water that was more acidic to get down into that very, very deep and very thick sedimentary package and dissolve those lithium sediments and put them into a brine suspension, make them basically a water-based brine. Now, the interesting thing about Bonnie Claire is that the water in our basin is very alkaline, right? So if you remember going back into school, pH 7 is neutral. You start going above, it becomes more and more alkaline. And you start going farther and farther below 7, becomes acidic. And the acids are typically what dissolve things. So if the water in our basin is, say, 9, 10, or 11, very alkaline, what we were hoping to do is find a way that you could basically have water come in that was more acidic. So this would be rainwater. It would be drainage water, the same way sort of all those sediments got drained in over millions of years, and find a way to essentially trickle down through that entire package to generate the lithium brines. And what we have is an analog to what's going on at Clayton Valley, which is 50 miles to the north of us. That's Albemarle's Silver Peak mine up there. That's the only U.S. producing lithium mine right now. And it has essentially one of these structures underneath. And here, when I talk about a structure, I'm talking about a geological structure that's underneath the ground, down by the basement. It's basically mountain ranges that over time have contracted, extended, things like this. And the way I simply think about it is that it's created fractures in the ground that you are essentially hoping over time water would have percolated, in our case, downwards into those sediments and created the brines. It's a little different than what Clayton Valley has for the source of their brines, but that's okay. Like I said, to me, all the cake recipes are all a little bit different. But having that structure underneath was sort of the key, and this is something that we, or our technical guys, had postulated was there for a very long time, and that's where the seismic came into this, because what was found sort of at Clayton Valley is that you have, if you're going to drill and find these brines, you have to be drilling sort of within a certain distance of this structure, because what happens is again, if you could think about the water coming down through all of the fractures in the ground, if in fact lithium brine is generated and it's denser than the other salt waters in there, it would start to fill from the bottom up, and it would go and it would continue to fill into areas where there is porosity, right? So sort of think, again, porosity is like a sponge is the way I think about it, open areas. And those things could extend laterally for a while. But generally, we would think about this more of as from a bottom-up type of approach, and laterally, not so much. So the point is, we want to be fairly precise with the targeting of a well. And that's precisely what the seismic came in and allowed us to do, or it's going to allow us to be even more precise ultimately when we get let's just say the finalized target. We have a target picked out. We put that on the news release. That doesn't mean it will ultimately be the best one, because frankly, as I've already seen from the amount of interpretation that goes into these surveys, there's a tremendous amount of science, but there's a tremendous amount of art as well. So it wouldn't surprise me in the end if the technical teams continue to refine that target a little bit better. But if you look at that news release, you'll see that essentially the drill location would extend right down, let's just say, along the flanks of that structure. So, and then the idea would be to intercept any, zones of porosity or permeability where the brines could have basically taken place. And that is something that we're going to start putting into our plans as we go forward in 2024. Now, this type of a drill hole would be something, first of all, that I would consider to be deeper than any other ones that we're drilling. And again, going back to what we're doing in our core resource upgrade area, we've been going to 2,000 feet in depth, but of course, the last hole that we drilled where we got the assays back down to 2,500 feet, they were tremendous, that extra 500 feet. So the last hole that we did, and for which we are awaiting assays, we went down to 2,500 feet. But these kinds of brine targets would be things that you should think about. We're going to go down to the basement. And the basement is basically, the lowest level down there before all the sediment started being deposited on there. So the way Bonnie Claire works is, if you just think about, you're looking at a map, you're looking from the west on your left to the east on your right. The basement continues to fall away as you go towards the right. Now, it also gives us the potential for even thicker packages of sediments, but that structure that's down there that's giving us basically the ingress route for all of the fluids that we hope, collected down there would be, extend all the way down there. And the point being, again, is that these are the types of things that would require a drill to go all the way down, I would say, essentially to basement. So it's going to be deeper, more expensive hole. Obviously, we'll figure it out. It has different connotations for the capacity of the rigs, et cetera, and the type of testing that you do. But we're tremendously excited about, because what I really want to impart to everybody is that this is not an either or type of a situation. I consider this brine to be entirely additive to the potential for shareholder value at Bonnie Claire. Now, it's going to take some time to figure this out. The only way we're ultimately going to know is to drill. Seismic was, I guess we could say the sediments were the first step, the seismic was the second step. We have the structure. We've confirmed that structure runs underneath. That's the third step. Now we're going to drill it. The way to think about this is also that if you were to look again at the news release and look at the figures, you'll see that the seismic was run over a very, very small area of the entire portion of Bonnie Claire. Now, this is a north-south trending structure, so there's no reason, at least in my mind, to think that all of a sudden this thing stopped at the end of the seismic lines. The structure should continue as we go along. And the point being is that I would think about this as an evolution of continuing to run seismic, going back, interpreting that seismic, and then taking another shot at it if we don't find brine or a target, the first time around. Things like that. Think of this as an iterative type of process where we get multiple bites at the same apple. So, when I think about natural resource development in general, it's all about de-risking things. Or another way of saying that is it's about increasing the odds for success. And I think that what we found with this structure that runs underneath Bonnie Claire is precisely something that increases our odds of success for something totally different that we hadn't even counted on. So I mentioned yesterday in a little video that I had done just to sort of alert people to the news release that, Bonnie Claire is a beast, and there's a lot of things going on here, and we are going to look at all of this in a non-exclusionary way. To me, these again are all additive pieces of potential value. They all require time. They'll require money. A great game plan to do this in the most practical way. It's going to take a bit of time. There's no doubt. But don't think for a second that we're moving away from our core progress of getting towards PFS, because I can tell you that OEMs continue to ask me, how quickly can you get me the lithium? Regardless of what we see, with short-term car sales or lithium prices or with Chinese traders or doing things like that. As I always say to people, in 30 years, I've never seen a commodity that's able to go from 500,000 tons a year to 2 or 2.5 or 3 million tons in the space of 7 or 8 years. It's just simply a growth rate that can't be sustained. So you'll certainly have your ebbs and flows, but the tailwind of stronger lithium prices, as far as I'm concerned, for higher and for longer than what people think, is going to help us tremendously as we move forward. So we're just starting out of the blocks right here. The company is just starting to make itself known for its core project. I think this is a tremendous example of extra value optionality. You'll often hear me talk about it. I'll continue to talk about it going forward. And I want everybody to be aware that we are going to do what we can to exploit this. And we're certainly going to be telling you more about this in the near future. And if everything goes well, I would certainly hope by the end of 2024, we're going to know a lot more about brine at Bonnie Claire. So I think that's, from an overview perspective, that's probably enough to say right now, Max. If anybody wants to get down into the weeds a little bit about it, more than happy to do that to the extent that I can. And then we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Question here. Would it be possible to see the real seismic? What I see in the seismic survey are schematic images. So is that something that you do?
I could talk with our technical guys or something like that. My initial reaction is probably that would be something that you would have covered under a confidentiality agreement. I'm assuming that the person who wants to see it is some sort of a geophysicist, because I can tell you just from looking at it, to me it's almost an absurd type of thing that you're looking at. I have no idea how people interpret these things. That's the kind of thing, though. Feel free to follow up to one of our emails, and we can take it to the next steps if that's something that seems to be important.
Yeah, perfect. We had a question come in via email. What are some of the catalysts that I should look forward to going into this quarter and next?
Okay. Well, that was certainly, I think, one of them. We started talking about this back in October. What we have is a second of the 2 diamond drill holes that we did last year before, we got out of the field with the weather coming in, et cetera. Those assays, I think, will be coming in fairly soon. let's just say somewhere around the end of January. Maybe we'll be lucky, get them a little earlier, maybe a little later, somewhere like that. I always like to be conservative about these things. But that'll be coming in. Hopefully, I'll be able to say more about metallurgy. We're working on lithium hydroxide. I've been telling the market that for a while. It's an iterative process. So hopefully be able to update you with something about that. But we're going to be developing a new work plan for 2024 going forward. A lot of it obviously is going to be very similar, I think, to 2023 because we know the area that we want to upgrade the resource in, right? This is, again, going from an inferred to a measured and indicated status with an existing set of drill holes that's already been set out. Obviously, I hope at any point in time that I could talk to people about an OEM offtake agreement. We all want to know that. Believe me, this is one of those things, however, you can't talk about anything until it's done. That's just the way it is. I can't tell people who I'm talking to or what I'm talking about, et cetera. It's all under confidentiality agreement. All I can ask people to do is just say, take my word, people are still talking about it. These are important things, but they take a long time to do. As you can imagine, very, very complex. Trying to work that out. So, I mean, those are the major ones. Of course, as soon as we get back into the field, then we'll start the whole progression again of a bunch of drill hole data coming out. We're also going to have a report, I think, at some point in time, I'm not quite sure. I was probably on the order of, I don't know, late spring, let's say, where we'll be talking about some of the conclusions of the borehole mining report. We have consultants who've been working with our PEA authors and people who are also going to author our PFS, talking about the requirements to be needed for PFS. Basically what the borehole mining report has a lot to do with is, how does the ground behave at various depths? What are the horsepower requirements? The power requirements necessary to get material up and out of the ground. Remember, this is sort of at this point in time, this mining technique is not something that has been used, certainly to this extent. Cameco does use it at Cigar Lake. It's used in hydraulic excavation in other areas of the world. But this is from my perspective, it's a whole different ballgame with regards to that. So I think what's going to happen coming out of that is clearly going to be important to talk to the market about. So that would be one more thing. And I think the rest of it is just basically to make it as clear as we go along where we are in the entire game plan of getting to PFS, which I consider to be, again, the sort of the linchpin, the normal leverage point where large mining houses want to start talking to you more, and even car companies, things like that. As I've said previously, there's a lot of mining house DNA in these car companies. I can tell because they're consultants. I can tell by the questions they ask, and et cetera. So it sort of comes back to PFS. That being said, I still don't think, and this is just my opinion, that PFS is necessarily going to be as important historically as it always has been, meaning that I think people are going to be getting involved with lithium players at earlier stages simply because of those supply-demand dynamics that I talked about earlier. So when I could talk about that, I certainly will. So there's a host of things that we'll be talking about going forward.
A little bit of a follow-up on the topic of OEMs and the NDAs signed. We have someone asking here how many NDAs were signed, but probably a better way to phrase it, maybe if you can say where the companies are headquartered. Are they all U.S. and also how many companies are currently in conversation?
No, I'm not going to say anything about that because that's, to me, that gives you away a competitive advantage. I think, though, this is how I would think about it if I were an investor. You've seen, the Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S. You've seen even later swaths of sort of legislation coming through, which are going to dictate where the EV tax credits are going to be able to be utilized, right? So clearly, let's just say China, right? A Chinese car company, or, not that I'm Chinese, I don't believe have tremendous presence in the U.S. auto market, but as an example, any country that's seen as being non-friendly to the U.S., if they get involved with either, the component making, the batteries, which is sort of an interesting nuance, right? Well, if those types of countries are involved, then the U.S. tax credits are not going to be available to the end purchasers. So I would simply think about the players would be all of those who essentially are non-Chinese or affiliated in that way. And I think that'd be a pretty fair representation of the type of people that we're talking to.
Perfect, thank you. And due to brine exploration that needs additional drilling, will it add additional expenses that were not termed into the prior estimates for which you had to dilute last year?
It would. I mean, I think certainly it would. If you just think about it in its simplest form, even let's just say, for example, a brine target just happened to be within the resource upgrade area and happened to be in one of our already previously chosen drilling locations. We would be essentially extending that underneath down to the basement. So there would be additional costs for that. I will tell you that costs tend to go up quite a bit, as you would imagine. The deeper that you go, things happen. Greater, again, horsepower requirements to turn the drill. Sometimes you need a larger well bore to start, all sorts of things. So, there's no free lunch, let's put it that way. But it's the kind of thing that, again, you plan for. There's always going to be dilution, right? Obviously, we're a non-revenue producing company. All, essentially juniors are in the same boat. Our job is to try to minimize that dilution to the extent that we can without throwing away opportunities. I would argue this is a tremendous opportunity. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden we'll go drill 50 holes looking for brine. But we could be judicious using the science and the money that we've already spent to look at places, et cetera, perhaps think about more seismic going forward. And it's a balancing act. But, in the end, obviously, it would cost more money to do it. However, if we were to hit brine, well, there's the opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you. Reddy here says, I see a lot of royalty companies interested in providing financial support to junior miners. Are you in talks with anyone who could provide financial support if needed? Are you thinking this avenue as an option as well?
Yes. Since day one, started thinking about the potential for royalties or stream. You've often heard me talk about with metallurgy, the fact that we have a lot of potassium. And the thought is that we could generate a potassium fertilizer, potash, the way I've always known it. So these are the kinds of things that we continue to think about now. Streaming money, royalty money can be very expensive money. Traditionally, it has been. But, thinking about that, thinking about JVs, thinking about, all sorts of different things. I can't think of too many different types of things that we haven't been approached about. It's just, again, being judicious about when you do something, why you're doing it, how much does it cost, et cetera. But the short answer is yes, talking to all sorts of people.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that answers all the questions that we have right now. Okay. I think we just had another one here come in. Steve here says, I may have missed Steve addressing this, but is the company pursuing an active funding round at this time? If not, is one planned? You never say never. Right now, we're fine with cash. Going into the new year, we're certainly hoping that we're going to see a different tenor in the markets. We're going to need additional money to finish all of our work plans. But it's the kind of thing that I think we announce when we're ready to announce it, as opposed to doing it right now. But obviously, to become very clear when the time comes. The way I look at it as we go forward towards PFS, there are going to be some big ticket items that we're going to have to plan for farther down the road. But right now, we're just going to be sticking with essentially the drilling, the ongoing network, starting to get the reports written, and our marketing, which is very, very important. We're just starting to get off the ground with the marketing, starting to talk to people that we never essentially had the funds to do so previously. So I'd say probably let's just leave it like that. It'll become very apparent, when we're ready to go. In the meantime, I just tell everybody, again, don't get too wound up on what's going on at the macro environment. These are the kinds of things, the walls of worry, et cetera, that all investors face. But when you've got an underlying fundamental strength in the commodity like we have in lithium, it really will bail you out of a lot of different things. And as I said, we're busy de-risking Bonnie Claire in as many different ways as we possibly can. And all of that just cumulatively adds up to increased chances of success. And that's ultimately how we're going to get the payoff. So
it's probably how I'll leave it for now, Max.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And what are your thoughts regarding statements about different types of batteries, including sodium element batteries and things like that?
Yeah, my thoughts are generally it takes a tremendous amount of time to develop something new towards commercialization. And one of the things I always liked about lithium was that not only anode, cathode, but it's essentially it's in what's in the center. So I've seen a lot of talk about essentially how uh, nickel demand has materialized because they've sort of thrifted that out. Cobalt the same way, that kind of stuff. I just don't see that happening with lithium. Certainly not within the time span that we're talking about. I mean, it's one of those kinds of things. Can you realistically take a chance as a car company? Just saying, hey, we think that a sodium battery is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're going to put all our eggs into something that really doesn't exist in the form that lithium batteries do, and then hope everything is ironed out going forward. I'm sure that there can be some, basically commingling of these things over time. But out of all of them, I mean, lithium is the one clearly has a dominant position. I just don't see it being essentially displaced anytime soon. So I'm very comfortable with it. If I were an investor, that would not be my primary worry about this whole thing. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks for that. Reddy here says that you looked excited and energetic in the site tour video. And he's wondering when the next time you'll be having a site tour is, and if there will be an opportunity to participate.
I'd say there'll be an opportunity. I don't know. We don't have one planned right this second. You don't really want to be out there in the desert right now. I mean, sure, it's great to go back to Vegas if you want to go have some fun. Think about it probably maybe in the spring, something like that. We'll see if it looks smart for us to arrange something. It's great. There's one thing I will say that definitely becomes clear when you are actually standing on Bonnie Claire, and that is just the sheer magnitude of it. I can sit here or stand here all day and point at drawings on the ground and tell everybody it's 25% larger than the island of Manhattan and this, that, and the other thing. It just doesn't do it justice. One of the stories that I tell, and I'll tell it quickly here, is we took 2 buses going up. I don't know, hell, we must have had 45 people in there, just jam-packed going up. And I said to people as we're coming up from the south, remember Vegas is 2.5 hours, to the southeast of Bonnie Claire. I knew where to sort of look, but I could see where the ground color started to change. And, Richard he'll be technical about it. Well, that's the playa. Okay, fine. Here's the dried lithium on the ground is the way I think about it. It starts turning white. So nobody else knew it. And I said, hey, folks, take a look over on the left, right? Now we're still going to drive for another 5 or 6 minutes, basically at 65 miles an hour, right? Before we hit the gate to Bonnie Claire. Remembering again that the project literally abuts an interstate, a U.S. interstate highway. So with high power lines right overhead. And the point is you're sitting there on the bus, and now we're not talking about moving 10 miles an hour, but interstate speeds. And you go for another 5, 6 miles until you finally get to the gate. And then you drive in, and you drive in for another 20 minutes on essentially the gravel road, and you're just looking all around you, and the mountain ranges are way up there or over there, this kind of stuff. And you just say, oh my goodness, we have no neighbors. There's just not, again, no endangered flora, fauna, anything like that. We have this entire basin to ourselves. So that is something that is definitely hard to conceptualize unless you're there. I wish I could take everybody there to show them it, because I think it would really give people peace of mind. But anyway, long story short, if we get the chance, we'll try to get another tour up there when there's some activity up there. So stay tuned is what I would say.
Perfect. Thanks for that answer. So that looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. So thank you, Steve, for taking us through the updates and the Q&A session. I also want to thank everyone who submitted questions. So today's recording will be available to watch on demand shortly after today or tomorrow. So look out for that. And before we wrap up, I'd like to pass things back over to you, Steve.
I appreciate, obviously, everybody's time. I know, a lot of people are just getting back into the office. We didn't want to do something the last couple of days, give everybody just an opportunity to sort of settle down. This is a very, very important piece of information as far as I'm concerned. Our technical teams thought that this structure was there. This is confirmation that it is, allows us to go forward with confidence for next steps, trying to evaluate the potential for brine here. But it's indicative, again, of the multiple bites of the apple that we're going to get at Bonnie Claire. And if you're not a shareholder, I encourage you to become one. And for those that already are, obviously, thank you for the support. We are moving as quickly as we can, as many different ways as we can to increase shareholder value. So I'm sure I'll be talking with you soon.